Oklahoman Newsroom, it's time for Thunder Thursday, brought to you by your friends at Charleston's in Bricktown. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell and Thunder beat writer Eric Horn. Guys, lots to talk about as the Thunder is on every other day. A game off, game off. It's great. It's great to be in this part of the season. I don't know how the Thunder feels about it, but Eric, let's start with some talk about Russell Westbrook, because while a lot of attention on Paul George and obviously the trip to LA earlier this week, a lot more talk about him as it relates to the Lakers. Russell Westbrook continuing to struggle shooting the ball, but continuing to average that triple-double. He's doing a lot of stuff, even though he's not shooting it very well right now.
Yeah, and I was remarking to you before the show, I think Jeff Van Gundy had a great line on the Lakers broadcast. It's getting late early. And the deeper we get into the season, we're getting almost to halfway through the season, and you start to wonder more and more if Westbrook's ever going to come around with his shooting. You figure he's going to get a little bit closer to where he was in previous seasons, but this might just be one of those seasons where Russell Westbrook just doesn't have it. This guy is really struggling from the field. He's on one game, off one game. Granted, he had a good game against Phoenix and another good game against Dallas, a couple of nights after that, but he's not stringing together consistent offensive performances, and that's got to concern the Thunder, particularly when they get closer to the playoff time. It's going to put a lot of pressure on Paul George, guys like him, Dennis Schroeder, Steven Adams, and Jeremy Grant to be perfect every night, particularly when Russell Westbrook is taking, second most shots on the team, most shots on the team. Like you said, what's encouraging about Westbrook is he's doing a lot of other stuff. His defense has been better. He's among the league leaders in steals, led the league and leads the league in assists this year, rebounding at a high rate as he always does. He's doing a lot of the other stuff. And some of the things that are positive about Russell Westbrook is when he's had some of these bad shooting games, he's basically gotten himself out of the way on offense and ceded control to Paul George. We've seen some times where he hasn't, and it's gotten the Thunder in some trouble. But more often than not, Russell Westbrook has kind of taken a back seat to Paul George when those shooting nights have been bad for him, and it's benefited the Thunder.
Barry, if it is getting late early this season, and Russell Westbrook, this is just what he's going to be this year, what's the best thing that he can do for this team as it relates to his shooting? I mean, if he's just going to be a streaky shooter or struggling to shoot, does he shoot less? Does he? What's the answer? Get to the rim more. What do you tell Russell Westbrook if this is where he is?
Well, I believe in asking people to do things they're capable of doing. So just telling Russell Westbrook don't shoot so much or quit shooting threes or all that, what I would is not good. What I would do is I would try to appeal to Russ and say, quit shooting emotionally. He seems to take most of his shots in emotional times when he's either been wronged by the refs or he's in some sort of macho contest with a fellow point guard who's got on the wrong side of him, or just shots he's just taken out of frustration. And if he would cut those out, that would limit the bad shots. He's still going to take bad shots. Everybody takes bad shots. But if Russ just went a little less emotional on his shot taking, that would help a lot. He's actually, outside of those shots, he's playing pretty well. His defense, I think, is better than ever. I don't know what Eric thinks, but I think he's playing better defense than he's ever played before. He's clearly rebounding like a madman. He leads the NBA in assists. So his all-around game is okay, but those 4 of 16 and 4 of 22 nights are just killers to the Thunder. And just don't shoot out of emotion so much.
Yeah, I don't know if this team can contend, truly contend, if he's not hitting a higher percentage. We'll talk about the trade deadline here in a minute, but they're still winning at a pretty good clip, even as he's struggling. And Eric, that's in part because Russell Westbrook's finding a lot of other ways to impact the game, but it's also about Paul George and his amazing play. We've talked, before at Thunder Thursday and other times about MVP chances for Paul George. Is there a chance he's playing better and maybe his chances of winning MVP have actually dropped in recent weeks?
Well, I mean, James Harden hurts that because James Harden has just had a tremendous close to the month of December, particularly without Chris Paul. As people saw against the Warriors on Thursday night, Harden was outstanding. He's got a really unique game that stands out with the way he's able to create three-pointers and make such a high rate of them off the dribble, step backs. Harden is playing a game that really fits into the mold of what analytics guys like. He gets to the free throw line a ton, makes a bunch of layups, and he hits threes at a rate off the dribble that we haven't seen, frankly, from that position. Paul George did his best this month. He did his best in the month of December to make his case for the MVP. He's been the Thunder's best player this year on both ends. He plays better defense than Harden. He's among the league leader in steals. He's probably the best two-way player in the game outside of Kawhi Leonard right now. So Paul George is certainly a guy who should be in that top 5 discussion. It's just going to be hard from a splash standpoint when you go up against a guy like James Harden who's doing it from three-point range. He's leading the league in scoring. He's got the Rockets really surging right now. The Rockets are probably going to wind up finishing in that top 3 in the West. It's in the Thunder's best interest, if they want Paul George to be in that race, to continue winning and to actually have a better record in the second half of the season than they had in the first half of the season.
You mentioned the top 5 candidates and Paul George being in there. I'm interested to ask Barry this because it's always LeBron at the top of your top 5, but with him being hurt, who's in your top 5? Where does Paul George rank at this point, Barry?
I think he's in the top 5. I think Harden probably is now in the lead. But the Greek Freak is probably the guy that was there before Harden. So those two guys, Harden and Antetokounmpo. How close did I get?
Gotcha.
Got it. Yeah.
Did I get it?
Antetokounmpo.
I got it.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Barry.
I ought to be in charge of the Heisman ceremony.
You're the real MVP.
Yeah. So Antetokounmpo, and I didn't get it that time. He and Harden rank 1 and 2. You got LeBron, and then you've got I think you got Paul George, and after that,
is he ahead of Kawhi Leonard in your mind?
I do think he's ahead of Kawhi.
Okay.
Kawhi's missed a few games, and George, frankly, I think is playing better than Kawhi so far this year. Although Kawhi's playing at a high level, and the other guys, nobody else has really stepped up to claim that crown. So I think George is in the top 5. But it's going to be virtually impossible. Without the Thunder really soaring and getting into the high 50s and contending for the number 1 seed in the West, unlikely that he could win it.
Nary a Warrior in your top 5, Barry.
Oh, for crying out loud, of course not. Of course not. Those guys. If Curry played enough, he'd probably be in the – but Durant's not. Durant's sort of screwing around. Anybody watch that game last night? He's out there screwing around the whole game. So no, the Warriors, I think, are still the team to beat, but probably not an MVP candidate.
Eric, is your top 5 any different? And I assume you get a vote, so you're probably starting to look at this a little differently than maybe I would or Barry would even.
Yeah, Harden took the lead last night, and again, plenty of time for guys to shift and that to change. It would probably be a Harden, Giannis, Paul George top 3. LeBron James, you throw him in there, and once we see the totality of the Lakers, you're going to have to give LeBron James a bump because that was a 35-win team last year, and they're probably going to be close to a 50-win team and a playoff team in the West, which is a brutal Western Conference. LeBron James, as Barry has said many times before, could be the MVP every season. You can make a case for him this season, and probably rounding up the top 5, you probably throw in a guy like maybe a wild card like Joel Embiid, who's playing really well, putting up big numbers.
I still think Anthony Davis is one of the best
Anthony Davis
players
playing
in the
his
league.
tail off.
Yeah.
And then you'd have the Warriors bunch in there too. They could catch fire. Steph Curry could play a big part in their closing stretch to them getting the 1 seed in the West. So right now, Harden would probably be the leader for me.
Well, speaking of the Warriors, let's talk about them and as it relates to what the Thunder might or should do by the trade deadline, which is fast approaching, a little over a month. February 7th is the trade deadline. Do we sense vulnerability? I mean, I know that losing to James Harden is there's no shame in that, Barry, but is there a sense that the Warriors might be vulnerable and that could impact a decision by the Thunder or any other possible contender in the West?
I think so. They were vulnerable last year. The Rockets were the virtual equal of Golden State, and if Chris Paul hadn't got hurt there in game, was it 5 or 6?
Yeah.
Houston probably wins that series. So the Warriors, 2 things with the Warriors. One is their chemistry is a little shaky. You got the Durant, Draymond Green feud. Don't really know. If you watch them, they're not playing this beautiful game that they like to tout. They're going to isolation every other possession, down the stretch, every possession. So they're just out there playing. And now here in a few weeks, you're going to add DeMarcus Cousins to the mix.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes them unbeatable. Maybe it makes them implode. Cousins is capable of either. So we really don't know what the Warriors are going to look like. But the truth is that for about a better part of a year and a half, they have been vulnerable.
Okay, so Eric, if they are vulnerable, if they're not the for sure champion of the world this year, what's the Thunder need to be looking to do at the trade deadline?
Obviously, you'd love to go get a shooter. The Thunder's first option that they're going to say is internal improvement. Get guys like Alex Abrinas and Patrick Patterson shooting better. Hopefully you get anything out of Andre Robertson this season. But at this point, I probably wouldn't count on it. That's not to say that he can't come back or he won't come back. But to think that he's going to come back and be at the level he was last season before he got injured is just too much to ask of a guy that's required to be have so much athleticism and lateral quickness and movement on defense. The Thunder already has the number one defense in the league. You saw last night, even the Rockets adding a guy like Austin Rivers has improved their defense. Austin Rivers was in Kevin Durant's shirt on those last possessions in overtime in the fourth quarter. The Rockets' defense is going to improve. The Thunder already has a good defense. They need to find ways to space the floor, make things easier for Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, and Paul George getting to the rim because teams are starting to pack the paint on them, particularly these teams that aren't very good. They pack the paint and they make it difficult for the Thunder to do what they do best, get out in transition, get to the rim. And if the Thunder can get another shooter to potentially space the floor, they can get some guys to start hitting some shots. We've seen a guy like Abdul Nader actually step his game up in the past 5 games, be able to create off the dribble, provide some outside shooting. Jeremy Grant's been a competent three-point shooter from the corners this year. We all know about Paul George. If they can get Abrinas going, if they can go and get some other guy in a trade, they have an additional roster spot. They have a $10.8 million trade exception from the Carmelo Anthony trade where they can absorb some salary with that. That could help the Thunder's offense a little bit down the stretch, and that can help get them going. Right now, they're just not a great offense. They're 20th in the league. They don't have a ton of great shooting. So if they can get that going, the defense is capable enough of providing the Warriors with some challenges in the playoffs.
All right, lots yet to come. Again, about a month until that trade deadline. We'll continue to see how the Thunder shake out, other teams in the West. It's an every other day situation for about the next week for the Thunder. They're at Portland on Friday night, then back home for Washington for the Wizards on Sunday night. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.